Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this weekly ag weather forecast brought to you by the Farm Credit Associations of North Carolina. Well, we need to take stock of what January gave us, and we're going to start with precipitation. What you've got here is looking back over the last 30 days at the percent of normal precipitation. And some of the bigger picture things we've been talking about across the country, which are important to us in the Carolinas, is that a large ridge sat over the west and kept much of California very dry. All right, so that meant that all of the precipitation that came into California, and it was certainly a lot of crops that we are in competition with in North and South Carolina and also Virginia, okay? But all that precipitation that came into California in December has had to sustain them through this very dry January. The Southern Plains, this part of the Cotton Belt, has continued to see drought get deeper and deeper. And while there's some good news for that area coming in here in the near term, it is not as though it's going to be fully corrective on this drought. Meanwhile, coming out of Tennessee, Kentucky, into the Appalachian Mountains, and then of course over here, we've mostly seen well above average precipitation, anywhere between 100 and 175% of normal precipitation, including some big systems that have rolled up through along the East Coast, those big nor'easters. Take note of what's going on here through this part of the Midwest and the Corn Belt. We do have drier soils in these areas, but we're going to be seeing some big changes there coming very soon. So that's just a look at precipitation. Maybe another way to look at it, let's take a look at this. This is how it would look if you ranked it. So now we put this in the context of the last 130 years. You can see how dry the West is. You can also see this region down here in parts of the Southern Plains still battling against drought. But we've been quite wet over here. And that was honestly well predicted by the models, the correction of the drought that had developed over here in the Carolinas up to Virginia. Now let's talk snow, because we're going to have more of a discussion this in a little bit. Not for North Carolina, thankfully, finally, but if you look here at how much snow we've accumulated so far this season, so this was through early this morning, you can tell that we have some places here that have already picked up between 4 and 10 inches of snow in North Carolina. Getting back over to the Appalachian Mountains certainly picked up quite a bit as well. But I always find these maps instructive to look at them compared to the historical average. And so what I'm going to show you next is the percent of normal. Now, I only let this go up to 200% of normal, but look at this part of North Carolina, South Carolina here, picking up just all of that snow earlier in the season. And this past weekend system clipped us, right? Went right here. And if you just look at the snow amounts we had on the back side of that, a couple places picking up an inch or two. But really the big story was from New Jersey, parts of Maryland and Delaware, but from New Jersey north, cutting across Boston, which tied a record here into parts of Maine. Very, very heavy snow out of this. Okay, why discuss this? Well, it all boils down to us looking at the longer-term health of the weather systems rolling through and what they're doing to our soil moisture. That's what I'm concerned about. And the good news is the latest drought monitor continues to peel back on the drought area over here in the Carolinas and Virginia. In fact, let's do it like we normally do. Go to the change maps. And what we're going to see is that looking back over the last 3 months, we've now seen improvement. There are still a couple of places over toward the Appalachian Mountains here on the east-facing slopes where we do have some drier conditions still in place. But I expect this to continue to get better. And we're going to talk about that long-range forecast first before we dig into the bigger picture. In the Southern Plains, this part of the Cotton Belt, what I'm very concerned about is expansion of the drought over a larger area as we go into spring. But we got a system that's going to roll through this area, producing some very heavy rain here in the near term, and we've got a lot to be discussing with that. All right, so take a look. This is the big picture, longer range. Our La Nina continues to fade. All right, it's expected to, but it's a very slow fade. We've talked about that a lot, but it's still largely present over a big section of the Pacific Ocean, with this kind of greatest stronghold right in through here. We call that Nina Region 3 and also Nina Region 1+2. It's fading in the central and western Pacific. That's, again, what we expected. Now, the other part of this that we have to consider is how the MJO is going to respond, and this maybe is the most important part for the long range. You see, over the next 15 days, the MJO, which is best seen in these colors, sits right on top of phase 3. And it has been a very long time since the MJO's greatest rising motion, okay, that's where the air is rising in the atmosphere, to sit over the Indian Ocean. Now, when we look out here, if you watched my content a week ago, I thought the MJO was going to pop out somewhere on this side of the diagram, but maybe phase 4 or phase 5. But it appears that it's going to move out of null space into phase 3. Now, why discuss this? What does this even mean? Well, it's what we call a teleconnection. And right now, based off of all the evidence I have, the strongest connection we have in terms of determining what the jet stream is going to do is coming out of the tropics. It's not with the polar vortex. It's not even with the North Pacific or North Atlantic pattern. It's coming out of the tropics. And the MJO is preferring to pop out in phase 3. Now we've studied this historically, and this is what we know. Phase 3 of the MJO backs a ridge up here, and the flow tends to come around, dipping into troughs, running over a ridge over Florida, and then running right here out into the North Atlantic. See that pattern like that? So that's what history would tell us about a February MJO phase 3 when there's a La Nina. This is what the pattern will likely try to get into, all right? This is also very supportive if there's cold water in place here. And if we just go back and look, we do know that we still have that cold water in place. So I'm looking for this pattern to emerge in the models. Now, I'm going to wait for the brand new updates later today. They'll be in my report tomorrow morning for those of you that get it. But I'm going to see if this still holds true. Because the mid-February to mid-March outlook, if we start dipping those troughs in and bringing them around like that, that keeps this whole area active. Now, what's the point? That's outside of North Carolina. I think the models are still biased a bit too far to the north with the storm track. And I think they've got this all biased way too dry. I think we're going to see more systems curling down like this, curling through the Appalachian Mountains, running up into the northeast. And as a result, I do not expect us to have a drier bias through mid-February to mid-March. I actually think it's going to be better all along the Cotton Belt. Maybe the only place that's the last stronghold for drier weather will be pretty far west in Texas into the high plains. Unfortunately, this pattern does not produce a subtropical bit of the jet stream, which is why California continues to stay dry throughout much of February. Now, on the temperature side of this is going to be a pattern where we're going to get just a lot of, to be honest, ups and downs. I know that's kind of a cop-out way of giving you a forecast, but when you develop these deeper troughs that dig in like this, you end up getting these Arctic blasts, then they retreat, and there's a ridge that forms behind it, and the temperatures go back up, which just means your temperature pattern goes up, down, up, down. Now, we want to ask, is this going to continue into spring? And I'm going to set you up for next Monday's video. That will be an important video for you to watch. And the reason is because we're going to get brand new updates on the long range. Now, remember, the previous forecast continued to show this La Nina is already bottomed out and it's expected to fade through spring into neutral conditions and start to emerge maybe by summer as a weak El Nino. Now, that's getting pretty far ahead. Let's at least just look at spring from the previous model runs. You see, March, April, and May continued as we would expect with the La Nina to keep that area active. I again think it's too dry here. It's forecasting too dry there. So that means we could continue to erode our drought situation, almost eliminating it if these spring rains do materialize the way that I anticipate that they will. And again, we're looking over a 3-month time period, but I am not anticipating drought scenario expanding in the Carolinas or Virginia going into this upcoming spring. And that's a good signal overall. Now, we'll talk more about the long range when I get the new data this weekend. I'll present it to you next Monday, okay? From now on, though, in this video, let's go back to talk about the big system that's coming across the U.S. Take a look at this thing. Now, if we zoom in here at the mid-level flow of the atmosphere, we've got a short wave trough here. See that one? And a long wave trough underneath it. And there's a cutoff low here and a cutoff low there. Now, what's going to happen with this flow is this is amazing. This short wave is going to quickly get over here to Ontario, while the longer wave trough digs down. And it's going to leave a front sitting right here, a cold front. And behind that cold front will be a bunch of Arctic air from a big high. Now, what this is going to do is this is going to set up a multi-day event that's going to run right in through this area that will eventually bring the cold front through the Carolinas, delivering precipitation. But all the action in the meantime, we got to zoom back out there. It's going to be right here from Oklahoma and Texas, from Kansas all the way through to Michigan. We've already got a broad area with winter storm watches out. To the south, very heavy rain over this area. Currently, the flood watches are posted here, but they will expand. And we got to ask ourselves, when does this get over here to the Carolinas? It'll also be very windy on the backside. We got red flag warnings here, wind advisories and wind warnings across the rest of the northern plains. So this is a big system we're dealing with. Now, over this week, you can see the corridor of heaviest precipitation. And no, that doesn't really include much of North Carolina, South Carolina, or Virginia. But we will eventually be pushing this moisture in that area. But what you notice is, look at where we're bringing in this moisture. See this area? That was an area, you saw it on the drought monitor. I'll show it to you in soil moisture. Desperately needs this. This is down to 40 centimeters, that's 16 inches. This is an area, according to some NASA data here, that we're going to need to really bring in moisture to help correct some of the longer term drought expansion, especially in the southern plains. So what have we got? Well, let's go take a look at it here from the high-res European model. Okay, so as we play forward through Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, what do we have? We got high pressure over us. Now, if you watched it, that low is now curling up there. It's got a front that's lingering right in through here, and the high pressure that's over us this week is delivering on its backside the moisture into that front. Now, what you're going to watch is this is going to be a slow mover through the day on Wednesday, getting into the Thursday. Multiple waves bring in all this moisture to the lower Mississippi River Valley. When do we start to get a chance for precipitation in our area? It could be as soon as midday Thursday, but as we play this forward, the front doesn't sweep through us until we get into really, Thursday night to Friday, throughout the day on Friday, and that clears out. Now that's our biggest chance. It's going to be coming late this week, sliding through our area. And then behind it, a lot of cold air. There's a big Arctic high that's going to sit here, and it's going to sweep that front through and bring in a lot of cold air. So that's going to take, till the end of the week to get to us. After that, the models are attempting to develop a low and run it up the coast here. Not like a big nor'easter, but attempting to develop that. And I just want to let you know, this weekend into early next week, we could get some coastal showers out of that. Or if it does move inland, then we could get more precipitation out of this. But at this point, I don't have more evidence than that. So why don't we stitch this all together and kind of make a story out of it? I'm very worried about the ice potential from this system, but not for North Carolina. There is the chance right in through here of a major ice storm. Some places getting well in excess of 1/10 of an inch, maybe 1/4 of an inch or more. This could be. This is going to really hammer air travel. This is going to be a problem for power outages. This is going to be one of those systems that spreads just dangerous weather across a broad area. On the snowy side of this thing, take a look. That's the main snow corridor right in through there. So I'll just take you all the way out to early next week. That's what we're looking at. Right in through this area is going to be getting some snow. And if you remember, this might fill in some of what I'm calling the great snow hole of 2022. That area right in through there. Total precipitation for us generally is going to range, on the order of, in fact, let's just go look at it here real quick. We're talking about less than 1/2 inch when this front comes through. That's the general consensus. There's better precipitation as you get over toward the Appalachian Mountains, but that's quite normal given the lift over it. What you do need to see here is that some of the drought regions in this area starting to pick up some meaningful precipitation. Now watch this. As you go out there into week 2, I'm going to start you off on day 10. The pattern is getting really bunched up in the west, and the flow is going to try to come around like that. See that? Now what this means is if we develop another trough here by February 10th, systems are going to eject and run right in this area. And what's important about that is that the models right now are keeping this area wetter than average. I would expand it farther to the north. This whole region needs to be on the lookout for above average precipitation. Again, that flow, when it does something like that, that just tends to be active, producing big lows in this area that come running out like this, or possibly coastal lows that run up the East Coast. So we're going to continue February being very active here for us, as January was across the Carolinas and Virginia. I do expect more shots at some Arctic air, of course, and I also expect to see here, above average precipitation. Now, since we talked about that Arctic air, let's go take a look at the temperatures. So these are the highs we're expecting today on Monday. Look at how warm it is in the plains ahead of this big shortwave. Well, that's Tuesday. Wednesday, the system's fully blown here. And look at the difference between where the Arctic highs bring down the cold air on the backside and the mild air we had ahead of it. We got some 50s this week. But as you know, this all moves east. So Thursday's our warmest day. That's when the warm front comes through. The warmer air will be there. And then it's replaced by colder air once we get into the weekend. So Friday, the front passes. There's Saturday's highs. So now we're back down here in the 40s. And that cooler air hangs on to Sunday. But this pattern, once we get out there, let's shrink this up so you can see a little bit better. We're going to favor cooler weather in the day 5 through 10 time period, getting us out there to about February 10th. But overall, let me just show you how things shake down for the mid-February temperature patterns. The models are in major disagreement here. The GFS on the left, the European on the right. European is much more mild for us. And again, that would result in that pattern that maybe takes the trough something like this. And if that occurs, well, we get active because we have the moisture. But, do we have more mild days than cold days? I think the Europeans got this right over the GFS, which again is shown to you over there on the left. All right. Now, one thing I do know is the polar vortex is not our problem. Let this adjust here. There it goes. And you can see the polar vortex sitting here way in the North Atlantic over the Arctic almost. And it looks like a donut. It's sitting, spinning, doing its thing. And take a look at how strong we expect it to be. The forecasts are taking the strength of the polar vortex way up here. Now, if it was way down here, we'd be talking about a major disruption that I got to worry about. But I'm not seeing that right now. So when you see these milder forecasts, it helps that the polar vortex is strong, steady, and stable. We finished with a bit on South America. Now, what we had in the last 10 to 15 days was extremely heavy rain in Argentina. This map isn't showing you that. This is a forecast, but that's where the heaviest rains were. Now, over this next week, much of that heavy rain moves into southern Brazil's drought areas. And they continue very aggressively harvesting a soybean crop, planting a corn crop in the north. So they are way ahead of average on that. What you're going to see in the forecast is, as I let this 1 week sliding window go forward, playing out here fully into week 2, which stops right there, this section of central and eastern Brazil is going to be on the wetter side of average. Much of Mato Grosso, that's a big safrinha crop state, above average precip. But we see drought possibly redeveloping in Argentina and Rio Grande do Sul. That's going to be our target area to be watching here. The far southern parts of southern Brazil, and then Argentina, because they were extremely dry. They got 7 inches of rain, went right back over to hot and dry conditions again. Going to keep an eye on that. I'll report back to you again next Monday how all of this evolves and changes. But like I said, although we get a little bit of a break this week until we get into the late week time period when that front comes through, I don't expect February to be a boring month in terms of weather. Expect it to go overactive. We'll talk again soon on Monday. Have a good week, and we'll talk to you then. Thanks.